Hey, welcome to Shed Talks. Today I'd like to talk about Occam's razor and conspiracy theories. I've seen a lot of action on both sides. I try to stay, I guess, fairly connected to people who have different points of view. And I wouldn't say it's an equal number, but there's a sizable number of people that I know that we'll see what you would call a conspiracy theory and kind of quickly latch onto it. It's getting a little warm in here. But worse, in my mind, are people who will look at that and say, boy, the second you're telling me that more than one person cooperated to their mutual benefit in secret, that's just poppycock crazy nuts. And that probably comes from a lot of those theories. I think what happens is they become attractive. So you have a concern that you're being cheated. You are. You're being screwed. If you're an American, you're getting screwed. But if you hear a theory and it sounds outrageous and really would make a good action spy flick, people just naturally are more attracted to that, and I think that perpetuates the problem, because then every time someone is presented with something that is a theory that does imply conspiracy, they jump to that conclusion. Just like a lot of people assume that every type of mental illness presents itself like schizophrenia. People are ignorant. But I kind of want to speak to both sides, and I want to use Occam's razor to do it. And Occam's razor is something that we use in science and physics. I think it applies in philosophy too. Really, it's not only a straightforward, I think, self-evident truth on the surface. You can test it, and it basically comes down to this: if there are a number of possible causes for something, could have been the rabbit, could have been the wind, could have been that power line. And what happens is people will come up with aliens, or it didn't happen. It was nothing at all. Everything's fine. It's aliens. These are the people that are arguing with each other, and neither of them are really being serious. If you're asking me, well, nobody is, but that's okay. I'm saying they're not being serious. Occam's razor says the truth isn't perfectly in the middle. It's if you're running into any kind of quantity of problems, I think we can say we've done so. We've established some quantity of problems and a lot of potential causes, and almost definitely multiple causes. Occam's razor says, all things being equal, if you have no other data, all you have is this, and this. This is all we know. The official word is it's being caused by this. The crackpot word is aliens. Or something like that. Occam's razor says all things being equal, the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. Now you can test this, and you can test it without confirmation bias. You have to test it over time, and you have to look at a number of factors. And there's not just Occam's razor can produce a lot more than one answer. I mean, you unpin something and go, well, that basically points down that whole road. And so there's going to be a lot more choices down there. And that's, again, where conspiracy theorists can go off the rails. Well, there's no limit. Yes, there's an unlimited number of possibilities. But if you're serious about, let's say, protecting yourself against the pandemic, against the government, against business, against whatever perceived enemy you have, as my mom says, even paranoids have real enemies. So good on you. Protect yourself. But you can't protect yourself from every possible threat. In fact, you have to make a choice. Most of the time, you've got to decide, where's my threat coming from? Where's my biggest threat coming from? Often we're threatened from many sides. Where our health, how's our job security? Is there a natural disaster that's going to threaten me? Am I going to get murdered for my food? A lot of threats. So you cannot. This is not a game. You can't, in this instance. I mean, you can have fun with conspiracy theories about stuff that doesn't matter, but we're talking about life and death stuff. You owe it to yourself to say, all right, could have been aliens. I mean, it really could. I mean, the universe is immense. Aliens could exist, and if they're intelligent, if they're more intelligent than us, boy, I wouldn't put it past them to be a little cautious about actually interacting. Or I also wouldn't assume they're inherently good. They might just see this thing as a ball of resource to be taken advantage of, and why alert us to their presence if that's all that's going to happen? Okay, so yeah, a lot of people will say anything in that realm is a ridiculous theory. Okay, but what value does that have in calling that person's theory ridiculous? It shuts down the conversation. So the point of Occam's razor in the conversation is really to say, you may need to go a different direction because of your gut. You may feel something that I don't feel. I'm going to have to go this way. And if you look back, if you'll do this, and you can kind of play it back in your head. Some people, if you think about a lot of stuff, like I think a lot of people who will want to be on here do, you can probably do this historically in your own head, if you're being honest with yourself. But if not, going forward, you can say, look at the next, whatever the next 9/11 is. Now, back when that happened, by noon that day, there's no planes in the air, and there's a whole world sitting around going, what the fuck? Who did this and why? There were a lot of theories, and we ended up doing a lot that wasn't really related to that. It wasn't related to protecting ourselves from that, and I wasn't even related to retaliating against that harm, as if that's our way. I mean, that's typically not our way. I mean, retaliation is really, that's not the intent. The intent is to say, we're attacking you so you can't attack us again. If we showed up like this and you immediately surrender, okay, we don't need to follow through with that retaliation, because we're not savages. We just want peace and justice and freedom and hoorah, whatever. Obviously, the prevailing theories were really wrong, and we spent a lot of money and lost a lot of lives. And the place we were helping lost a staggering number of people. Yes, people could have used Occam's razor there. They didn't want to. There was an agenda. But for the lay person, using that would have been helpful. It's obvious, considering the number of things involved, number of airplanes involved, number of people involved, that this was not a lone gunman. It's unlikely that one person planned the whole thing and that the people executing it had no idea what they were really doing. So it took people conspiring. And man, in hindsight, a billionaire who's dedicated his whole life to fuck America, terrorist, I mean, it's kind of what he does. So that would have been, bin Laden would have been Occam's razor. Could have been Iraq. It just doesn't pass the sniff test, It just doesn't. It was worth looking at, We'd been in a war with them already. They just don't. Doesn't happen. But that's, that's war. That's political. Where you really have to apply it is where you start to see somebody saying, well, hey, we have this fact. We know things have gone this far. Who's to say it won't go all the way to there? We're not trying to talk uncertainties here, because anybody who is foolish. You don't know everything. So you're really going to make an educated guess. You're going to take all the data you can get, and you're going to bet on the simplest explanation, the simplest cause first. Because do this 10 times. Walk into your kitchen and see a mess. I have a cat, a dog, a teenager. I live in an earthquake-prone place. I can be forgetful, or I can be clumsy. Boy, those two things together. But if I'm tracking the historical outcomes of messes left in the kitchen, while every one of those things could have caused the mess that I see, Occam's razor says it's my teenager. That's what teenagers do. They'll leave a mess. Now, when you get really mad, finally you've had it and you really got to lay into them for it. Of course, that's the one time, your spouse has knocked it over, your cat has, and do it. It's not perfect, but if you think about it, you go into the garage and your tool's missing. You find something sticky. Something smells like feet. It's like Occam's razor says it's my teenager. That's a simplistic example, and not to pick on my teenager. He's almost a grown-ass man. So you do that 10 times, and what you're going to find is that you're not correct every time picking the simplest explanation, but you're going to be right far more of the time. And when you're wrong, where applicable, you're probably going to be closest to what was right. So for example, I've got friends who are talking deep state. Now, my problem with deep state is that it is an empowering term for something that is not mysterious. And I say that because calling it that and making it mysterious gives it more power. It's witches. It's a secret cabal. It's not secret. Maybe we don't know every individual involved. Maybe we are not privy to what is said at every meeting. But the deep state is not only just people, it's just rich, greedy people who are rather simply acting in their own best interest. It's that simple. They're not special. And I think that's where that's another place where people do latch onto those theories more, is that they are naturally prone to thinking of other human beings as being substantially better creatures than they are, or worse, thinking that they're better than some other group of people. And I mean, personally, that's my problem with a lot of things in religion. But the most obvious one is that I think Jesus was a dude. He was just a guy. In fact, in the Bible that we have now, there was a vote, and him getting written down as being the Son of God is 1-by-1 vote, if I recall correctly. Please don't eviscerate me in the comments if that's not perfectly accurate. And of course, I know people will argue and disagree about that and say, oh, well, yeah, this and that about the Bible. Doesn't matter. Point being, if you suspend that faith for a moment, just to come over to my side of the universe, and imagine that that was a human person who stood up for some pretty decent ideals and morals, taught people how to treat each other, said what is now some very reasonable shit that was radical at the time, I guess. And he got killed for it. I mean, this is not an uncommon story. We've got dozens of these stories in our country in the last 50 years. People who are like that. What I don't like about the deification of Jesus is that it lets us off the hook. And I think even if I'm an atheist, even if there is a God, even if that was the Son of God, quite frankly, whatever aim the God had, presenting him as a human was step one. I mean, that was intentional. I don't think it was ever wise, if it ever even happened, to take that away, because him doing all of the good stuff that humans can very well do proves that they can. Sets an example. It's leading by example. It's beautiful. As soon as you say, yeah, but he was only good like that because he was the Son of God. He was special. And I'm not like that. I'm just gonna get drunk and beat people because I'm not a different creature like. Yes, you fucking are. Yes, you fucking are. You know damn well what's right and wrong. And you got to own up to it. And you got to be your own personal Jesus. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and if you can get out of that level of idolatry of something so exalted above yourself, and I mean, mega churches is another great example. I absolutely agree with Karl Marx on the notion of the original economic sin. And I think that's probably more deeply cemented with me because my first religious experience was in the Mormon church where I was raised. And it was interesting to me that the person that would stand up front and talk to us had a day job. And when I started to hear this pinko commie atheist about Marxism and communism in high school, I was like, no, I mean, yeah, he's probably, I don't know, maybe he's really pissed off at religion, but fundamentally the notion of the original economic sin came down to, you got 10 people working on something like feeding the village, and one of those 10 people says, look, I know it takes all 10 of us all day to get enough food to feed the village, but I think I can improve our crop yields and our health over the coming years. If you would all just pitch in a little bit more, and I'll go talk to God for you. Now, I just humbly submit that I'll go talk to God for you should be a volunteer part-time job if you've genuinely got that ability. But I'd also submit to you that I think every individual needs to do that for themselves. I don't think that's right at all. And it's definitely not right to get paid to say that you're doing that. That's just, that's criminal if you ask me. Now, providing counseling services and, well, I mean, there's plenty of room for the clergy to have a paid job. Just not I don't have to dig in the field because I'm over here in this room meditating and having, hey, I have my spiritual time too. But, not on the job. Everybody's going to pull their weight. So I think that's where the conspiracy series get really outside of Occam's razor, is that they have this exalted notion. You're imagining this group of superior beings having such great power over you. It's just like the Wizard of Oz, you pull the curtain back and it's just some little evil fucking dude. It's like Scooby-Doo. I mean, those things all tried to teach us so much. Like, it's not that complicated. And the only way any of those conspirators have any power over us is by controlling our thinking, by controlling what we know, what we communicate, what we can see, but more than anything, controlling how we talk to each other, which is, part of what this channel is about. We need to talk to each other directly. There needs to be more than just the return to having real journalism, for one. I think, part of the death of real journalism has been from a craving for understanding a different perspective in other people's ideas and stuff like that. But that's not the place to do it. It's very wrong because the person who is, delivering that journalism is their job. They're paid for it. It's of course scripted. And as soon as money is involved in it in that way, then the person that you're developing the sense of trust for in the media, and even YouTube independent media places, that have scaled up and scaled up and scaled up, it gets harder and harder to trust where they're coming from. And I guess the distrust is really, are you telling me how you really feel? Because I think that's what we're really after. And I think it's a little disruptive when there's a notion that where somebody's coming from, what somebody's presenting, and they have some power, some media sort of pull that comes from something other than what they're saying. Now you're starting to feel like you're getting steered again. And again, this is where Occam's razor comes in. Even on those super lefty channels that I love to watch, they'll start to throw some stuff out there, and I'm like, wait, whoa, this is starting to feel, it's like they're trying to pull me in that direction. And they're doing so by saying, hey, you've listened to us for a long time. You've trusted us for a long time. What we've told you has rung true for a long time. And now we're trying to tell you this. Well, now I feel like there's an agenda. Because there's an organization. There's people making decisions on what's being presented. It's being written. What I'm doing right now, and what a lot of people who I want to do more of this are there's a dirty table here. I got no notes. There's no script. No, I will have notes, of course, at times. I'm not a big fan of notes, you know that. Those of you who know me. But it's important that what you're getting from me right now is just coming from this. No one's tried to get me to tell you something for their benefit or anything. This is just me, just my ideas. And that can be incredibly useful as long as I'm able to attract enough. Well, I don't have to attract it. I mean, enough diversity of opinion. I'd like to have that here, but as long as it exists, no, I'm not trying to corner the market on. Hey, this is where everybody comes to think. I'm just trying to inspire that, And I think if this is successful, people will actually not only, of course, I'm talking about roping in other people's channels, but getting people to do other channels. And I think there will be I hope that there will be forks of thought and areas that people want to talk about that are divergent enough that somebody else takes this notion and says, I'm going to do another group that, maybe focuses on, maybe it just focuses on religion, I'm very intentionally pulling people in who are, I've talked to a couple of people, but I'm very likely, and with any luck, the first two people who will join on this and who will present their own ideas and or have a conversation with me, do kind of a podcast and everything. The people I'm thinking of do not agree with me at all when it comes to matters of faith. And the next person I want to try to have do this, it would be one of the people that I never agree with politically. I think that has tremendous value, particularly in how we're starting, where, well, it's people I know. It's people I've known for a long time. It's people that I respect. They respect me. They're thoughtful. That's like the number one criteria. If you don't know what that means, go look it up. Integrity, thoughtfulness. Those are words with real definitions you don't get to make up for yourself. But I think that's really going to bring the value that I'm after, which is that there's greater understanding. There's nothing someone can say to me to convince me that there is a God. You cannot impart faith upon me. But I can have a greater and greater and greater understanding of what the world looks like to you through that lens, or where your motivations connect to that, or where, most importantly, where you are an individual who is separate from the church you've picked. And that's a discussion, I've had with many people over many decades of where I think, maybe the bigger problem is organized religion. When a handful of people go out in the woods and sit cross-legged and hold hands and chant, talk to the moon, or pray to God, or bow towards Mecca, or whatever, They're experiencing spirituality. They're having a personal experience. They're meditating. They're engaging in self-love, because they're trying to do something good for themselves. They're trying to help themselves, and it's an important thing that people need to learn to do more often. Oddly enough, as selfish as so many people can be, we don't always take care of ourselves. And for some, and I've talked to all people for an insane number of hours about religion, and my conclusion has come down to, as my friends will tell you, I'm not going to try to argue that, if for no other reason than why would I take something away? Why would I want to take something away from somebody I care about that offers them guidance and comfort, solace, that lets them sleep at night, that lets them feel like they've got a purpose in the world, that life actually matters? Wow, if that's really happening for you, if that's the kind of religious experience you're having, I don't care how fake it is. That's like saying, how can you like Star Wars? Well, it's fake. It's fiction. So what? I'm inspired by it. I really think the Force is a model for a lot of really cool shit. It's made up. So what? What if I told you that as a Dudist priest, that I'm starting a church. I'm gonna have the Church of the Terrestrial Jedi, and it's all based on the principles of the Force and all that shit. What harm would there be in following those things? And what harm would there be 100 years from now if people got to where they actually believed that there was a real alien god or some shit, that I'd made up? As long as it only uses the Force for good, and as long as it's not organized religion, it's harmless. And that's the thing. I think what happens when you start to get organized, you start to have collective power. And when collective power is driven by something you can't quantify, when you cannot prove what you're doing, it's wrong. It's wrong because you're creating an artificial consensus. You bring people into an organized religion with the positive bits. You'll notice with every religion, the stuff that people from the outside of that religion go, what? You don't tell people those things first, and I think that's kind of telling. I think a good religion would be like, all right, I'm going to cut it to you straight. The worst thing about our religion is we only ever get together when it's raining and we stand outside wearing cotton. It's our way. It sucks. It's cold. It's unpleasant. It's the shittiest part of our religion. You got to wear this weird shit and be cold. That's, it's the hypothermic club or some shit. Stuff should be on the table like that. You shouldn't need fantasy, but I guess people do. So I think that kind of, I think that leads to a greater propensity to take that whole gamut from nothing's happening to it's aliens. And you become attracted to the more sensational idea. Confirmation bias takes over, and you're finding little bits of evidence that connect those dots. It's very hard to avoid that trap. And the worst is that people are lazy. So you'll have a preponderance of facts assimilated, mixed in with stuff that are not proven or just opinion or are not provable. And people start to get lazy and think, well, yeah, it's kind of like circumstantial evidence in court. I mean, any one of those things wouldn't have proven him guilty, but man, 12 different things? Okay, maybe if those 12 things were all facts, and maybe if there was then, a hard piece of math. And I think, that's where you can do stuff with circumstantial evidence. It's where you can assemble things like that, is you throw science to it and say, not one of these things proves it. But mathematically, for all 12 of these things to be happening, the probability that it's not this is a very low probability. Therefore, our educated guess, even though it was all circumstantial, still has some science to it that says, boy, you're really asking a lot of people to believe that it's not that. You can still apply science. And that's a lot of what I do. I'm a data analyst, and I can take just a sea of very messy data and tease truth out of it to say, this isn't perfect, or that happens, and it happens roughly 7 times a year. You can count on it. Even though if you grabbed any one piece of data, it wouldn't tell you anything about that. Chances are you wouldn't even come across the incident. So you can do that. You can assemble circumstantial evidence. But what happens is people say, well, I don't have that math to prove it. And actually, most of the things listed there's no proof for them. There was a couple that were true, but those weren't actually super exemplary of the issue. That falls apart. And then worse than that, where I think people think they're applying Occam's razor, is they'll say, well, if that person's the bad guy, then that person must be the good guy, because they don't agree with each other, or they're competing against each other. You are presented with false dilemmas constantly. Nothing greater than the two dominant political parties. But Coke and Pepsi. Mac versus PC. You're given the illusion of choice. And then sometimes the illusion of a third choice. And then people get really, I've chosen the rare, funky third choice. I'm special. Of course, all of us Bernie Bros feel that way. No. Bernie's not unconventional at all. He's in the middle. He's a compromise, but don't see it. So I also want to speak to the other side, because I've seen a lot of that. People who are also lazy will look at that and go, the nanosecond you're saying even 2 people are conspiring, that's just quackery. That's just nutty. They just blow it off. And I've seen people actually catch it and go, you're describing a conspiracy. As soon as the word conspiracy applies here, it must be false. Simply because so many people have gone so far with entertainment and confirmation bias that so many conspiracies are like, huh? But the mere fact that you are describing a conspiracy, I can see the the pattern recognition, the human logic is, man, every time I hear one of these, it turns out to be something really horribly bogus. Well, that's a feature of people. That's a feature of this problem. But when you're dealing with life and death, and right now this is the issue that came up, was kind of arguing over whether or not this pandemic is a hoax or how much of a hoax it is. My position was, my Occam's razor was, well, I don't think we have anybody clever enough to actually orchestrate this whole thing. That's the aliens. Technically, we have the means. Technically, it exists. Technically, it's possible. And not even on a quantum level. I'm not trying to be all fancy like that. But technically, there's enough opposable thumbs. There's enough brains. There's enough computers. There's enough that if humans weren't like they are, somebody could have actually orchestrated and controlled and contrived this whole thing. But that's really tough. And I think, the number one way to approach conspiracy theories is to really look at what interest each conspirator has. Each person that must go along with this permanently to prevent it from being discovered. Because, well, I want to say as soon as it's uncovered, then you're screwed forever. But Panama Papers, nobody cares. We've got, 5 senators who engaged in a felony, insider trading, and it's not even, no one's even arguing it. No one's even pretending that it didn't happen at all. No one's pleading innocence. Some of them are saying, "Oh, I don't know about my investments. It just happens at random." But the evidence is overwhelming and damning. Not cool at all. And I think that's the problem that I'm having right now, is that's all that's happening, is people going, "Well, that's not cool." Well, no, it's a felony. People should be going to jail. We need to set examples. But what's really going on is that kind of thing. Somebody fucked up. And the latest is actually not that it was necessarily only what do they call it, the wet market in China. I've been to a lot of street markets in China. You'd be surprised at how much pure capitalism happens on the street in China. It's beautiful. It puts America to shame. It's amazing. It's like every good and service is adjudicated for its net supply demand market value for every transaction, which can be laborious. Every transaction, of course, some things have fixed prices, but you go shopping on the street, and the watch that you're wearing is going to help determine in what price that is. There's so much built into that. It's just amazing. But that's the claim, is that kind of marketplace, somebody selling something exotic, some bat meat, or just bats in China. They don't. China's beautiful that way, that they don't have illusions of, where did you grow this steak? What kind of tree does steak grow on? They'll have the real animal hanging. You're killing an animal to eat, and I've, from a vegetarian and vegan people, I respect that, and it's important to me to recognize the life that I'm taking to eat, even if it is a vegetable. Frankly, vegetables have feelings too. They've proven it. So you get back to this notion of dealing with crackpot conspiracy theories, and you apply Occam's razor, and what you come up with is, kind of a list of questions, kind of like a little kid saying why, but just digging a little deeper. And you can see, okay, yeah, could have come from that market. That was logical. But there's new evidence now that it probably came from a lab in China, that the U.S. is funding people going out into caves way far away from Wuhan, getting bats and testing them, looking for infections. And it's I think it's really important work. There's immediately when that was in this article, when that was uncovered, immediately it's like, oh, this is a terrible thing. And is it true? And did we pay to have this created? No. To our own best interest, we're funding research in a place where geographically and ecosystem wise, there's just and then the sheer population, there's just a lot of reasons why things like this will start in China. It's not because of Chinese people. It's not their culture. It's not their race. And that's that's another thing. That's racism is a bullshit conspiracy theory. And it's the laziest one of all. I don't want to have to try to figure out all the nuance. I don't want to have to try to figure out how to read people and check how they're looking at things and do all that labor to go, this guy's up to no good. This guy's going to mug me. Nope. All I have to do is apply this hashtag skin tone filter and I'm safe. Not only is that wrong and mean and racist and bigoted and blah, 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 that you don't fucking care about, the person who's doing that. It's also dangerous and stupid. You're going to walk right past somebody I know who's just a white dude, grew up in a military house. And he's going to steal from you. He's going to put you in danger. There's no limit. He'll fuck over his own family. And you're going to turn your back on him because he's a white dude. He's got short hair. He grew up in a military house. You probably bend over backwards if all he says is, "Oh, praise God, I'm a Christian." All he's gonna just say it. Doesn't believe it at all. How many of those are there? How many people use that? All I gotta do is tell you I'm a Christian. No, I'm sorry. That's another problem I have. People just saying that they'll just use that as a weapon. It's as a defense, but it's really just there to say, I'm invoking God to force you to trust me to be a good person. When realistically, even people of faith who are intrinsically good and don't have internal battles, maybe they don't need it as much, even if they believe. That's why they don't go to church. Maybe, that's why as people get older, they go, some people go to church less. Some people, they feel like, man, I got to be reminded, and pretty regularly, I want to be a good person, but I get tempted by shit. I stray off course. I find myself Friday night going, oh man, I'm a bad guy. So you go to church on Sunday and somebody's like, hey, this is what good guys do. Right. You go back to work Monday, try to be a good guy, try to learn, try to get better. That's fine. You can do that. But you can't use religion to prove anything. You use it to guide you. You use it to guide your moral. And then you got to dig. You got to find the answers to things. So let's say this virus came from this lab. U.S. funded it. Occam's razor said somebody screwed up. It wasn't Lawrence Livermore, or it wasn't Mayo Clinic doing it. It had to be in China because that's where the threat is. That's where there are so many vectors from animal to people that can happen that they don't exist now. In 3 years from now, they just do. There's an evolution. There's mutation, and now this new threat exists. Yeah, we want to study it, where it's coming from. But now automatically in this article, people are, oh no, we paid for this to get created. No, we were paying to catch it, and we were doing so in a in a place that shortcuts safety pretty consistently, another Occam's razor input, are you going to put it past a country that's they'll lie about shit. And part of it's cultural. And having been there, sometimes I can imagine why it's necessary. That many people. Man, it really helps. And I've seen it firsthand. It really helps when you're in a situation, though it's not the same as the kind of freedom we have. You've got that many people, and you've got good leadership, if you do, which they often don't, who says, duck. And 1 billion people duck. You can dodge a bullet. And they did that with the one-child policy. And there's just a lot of... Yeah, that's a bottomless subject. But having been there, the wrong was that they didn't act sooner. That they left themselves into the position of having to do that. And having to have a whole generation of people that have no siblings, no aunts, no uncles, no cousins. And worse, on the heels of thousands of years of culture that's been misogynistic, and where retirement is based on how many sons you have. Boy, that was a terrible crossroads. And now you have tons of infanticide, and you have way more guys than girls. That causes all kinds of problems. So no, it wasn't the greatest solution, but the greatest solution had a time component to it that had to happen a long, long time ago. And that's another thing. It's not just Occam's razor. It's not just the simplest solution. In that case, it probably was. Maybe it would have been better to just say, you got to get licensed to have kids, and you can have a normal number of kids. The people that aren't going to be the best parents, sorry, you're going to be childless. But then that probably leads to sterilization. And then who's deciding who's a good parent? And that's, there's not a good solution. So... yeah, it's a different place, and it's important that we fund research like that. And yeah, that may have caused it. It may have caused it to happen sooner, but it would have been foolish to just fly blind, to just let that eventually come out of a cave somewhere. Especially this virus, which I think, people in look no further. There's a cabal that's organizing this and causing this, and there's no point to even understand it because we're screwed. The worst feature of this virus is actually how many people never show symptoms. How many people don't show any symptoms for days, 14 days, 5 on average. That really lets it spread a lot. That could have been, I hesitate to say this, that could have been worse. What if a bat had bitten somebody way away from science, medicine, a city where immediately people are, there's multiple people in the same hospital with weird pneumonia symptoms. Stuff's going to happen quickly. You're going to have a better data set quickly. What if it starts off rural and over time, a few hundred people who are the right age or genetic makeup or whatever that don't really have symptoms contract this and carry it on for a few weeks, and one of them just goes to India for some reason. And then, it starts to spread in a village market there. And it gets to where hundreds have died, tens of thousands are spreading it before the first cluster of people happens in a city where there's enough of it in one place for somebody to say, whoa, this is a problem. That's probably too late. We would have probably lost millions instead of tens of thousands. So, no, it's not a bad idea what they were doing there. Obviously, considering the threat, maybe we need to step in a little bit more than funding it. Maybe we really need to play a little bit more hardball with the Chinese government and say, look, we're gonna partner with you on this, but your usual cost-cutting measures, your usual shortcuts that have toppled our cranes that you've made, they just have too much of a threat in this situation. So we're gonna have to enforce some standards that we're paying for. I mean, and I think that's a fair shake. You're not telling that country how to be. You're not telling their culture how to be. You're just saying, look, if we're gonna partner, if we're gonna pay, we're gonna have some standards. We're gonna have some safety standards, and hopefully that's something that comes out of this. But if you're saying no, it was engineered, it was spread on purpose, the Clintons did this so that Trump would lose. Well, as I told somebody when I was a kid, because I had much more direct knowledge, they were kind of feeling that way and looking around. Man, the man's following us. There's hidden cameras, there's hidden microphones. It's spooky. I was kind of like, oh, yeah, probably are. Again, that's sort of fantasticizing the notion of that thing, of spying and subterfuge and whatnot. And it's just, it's not that mysterious. It's not nearly as sexy as it is in the movies. But what I told them was, what's interesting about those kinds of intelligence groups is that if there's ill intent, if there's ill intent in a coordinated effort to suppress your freedom, they've already done that if you believe they can. They've already got you. Ironically, you're the one that's I'm the one that's warning everybody. I'm the one that's catching this. You're the victim. You've been had. Believing that they can gives them power. And this is where it gets a little bit tough. This may be a little over the top for some of you, but if you've been watching for 58 minutes, what's wrong with you? Maybe you're ready. You give people your freedom. You give people power over you. Now, you might say they forced me, but they forced you under threat of something, probably death. And you made a choice. You said, I'd rather be alive and live under a totalitarian dictator. Bottom line. 330 million Americans are probably about to make that choice, in my opinion. It doesn't take all of them dying, of course, but a critical mass percentage of people saying, No, under no circumstances. I'm not going to go out and be antagonistic. I'm not going to stir shit up. But if you come and try to take away my freedoms, even if it's slowly, I'm watching. I'm paying attention. I know what things I've lost. I'm going to have to stop you right there. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a 20-year-old that's throwing a Molotov cocktail. Most of the time in this country, you're throwing it at somebody else who's a victim. Or at best, you're throwing it at an enemy that has control over the nuclear codes. Maybe at that physical fire level, maybe that's not where we have this fight. But one of them is ring catchment. That is the issue that I think I might actually go to jail over. If I own land and I want to collect rainwater, I believe that fresh water is going to become the most precious resource on this planet in the next 10 years. I honestly think like the Great Lakes states are going to be like OPEC. It's a feature of climate change that I think is just one, and how we behave is just inevitable unless this changes everything about, if we all just stay the fuck home, all these problems go away. Isn't it amazing? So yeah, you got to draw that line in the sand now. You have to say, there's a point I won't cross. I'm not going any further. You got to be that guy in Nazi Germany who sat there with his arms folded. I mean, that's the perfect picture of it, You're not a badass rebel. You're not Che Guevara. You're not a freedom fighter. You're not a crusader. Get over it. Don't think like that right now. I don't think that's where we are right now. And I think that's kind of, that's a type of battle for a different time in a different world, different pieces of power that were simpler in a way. The democratization of information is why I say data will power the revolution, because our ability to not just get pieces of information, but to understand them, to communicate them over distance and time for free, as I'm doing now. Thank you, YouTube. That allows valuable data to get everywhere. It keeps a lot of that data from being hoarded and abused or manipulated. Makes it easier to validate things. It's creating problems right now because 50 years ago we couldn't see so clearly and quickly and easily how corrupt the DNC is right now. And that's part of what's going on. That's part of the weird thing that's going on, is that there's still this sort of group of people there that oddly, even across age groups that should know better, who still don't have a millennial on their staff. They still don't get Twitter. They still don't understand that we're able to know stuff. We're able to see stuff. You can't delete it once it's out there. And even if you try really hard and we can't nail anything down, it's back to that math thing. I'm sorry, there were 12 different things there. Enough of them are provable, and there's enough math to say there's no way you were playing fair there. We know better, and we don't have to be manipulated. We don't have to prove that for us to have the right to say, I don't trust you. I've got enough evidence. Occam's razor says, all things being equal, you're screwing me. It would be dumb of me to think otherwise. So I'm going to vote for this other person. And you're not allowed to get mad at me for that. Well, you're allowed to, of course, but that doesn't get you anything. It's also really important, that notion of if they can convince you that they can control you, they already have. It's also important to look at that and think, has that already happened? Am I already doing things that way? Because I've been told what to do. Question yourself a lot. As anxiety producing as that might seem on the surface, over time, you develop a great sense of peace and comfort and understanding. The noises that you hear off in the woods after you've spent a lot of time in the woods become not unknown. And you hear some creepy little and immediately know, well, that's the growl of a coyote, and coyotes aren't going to hurt me. Not here. But until you've had that experience, you might hear that noise and be like, is that a bear? Even if you see it. Or do coyotes kill people? I don't know. That ignorance causes the anxiety. Even though people say ignorance is bliss. There's some easy logic to that. But the reality is, on the other side of the anxiety that comes from questioning yourself a lot, particularly if you are inviting yourself into an environment like this where you're saying, I want to listen to this guy who completely disagrees with my vision of the world. It was a totally different perspective, and how could he think that? Even if that person never changes your mind, chances are what they've actually done is given you a much more comfortable sense of why you still believe what you believe. There's less mystery. There's better understanding of where people on that other side are coming from, what their motivations are, what their perspective is. And then when you hear they're in the woods, you go, it's all right. It's just a Republican. It's not going to hurt me here. All right, I think you've had enough of Dave on Shed Talks. I'm going to try to give you some shorter content in the future. And I think we could do something really cool here. And I look forward to talking to a lot of you and working with a number of people to get other ideas out there, and to particularly, help each other grow, help each other have a better understanding and have less anxiety, because we understand all these different perspectives, even if they don't change our mind. So, thanks for stopping by Shed Talks. Take it easy.